All right, so now we will walk through some of the structures in the respiratory system. This system functions to take both air into the body and also to expel air out of the body. We'll follow air in, and thus we'll start at the external openings, sometimes called nostrils or nares. These are located in the nose. Posterior to the nares or the nostrils is the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity possesses a few bony ridges formed by internal skull bones. These are called conchae or conchae. There's a superior and a middle and an inferior nasal conchae. And between them there are grooves known as meatises. This is the superior meatus. This is the middle meatus. This is the inferior meatus. As I remember these, I always remember that the conchae start with the letter C, the meatises start with the letter M. So I simply alphabetize them. Superior, superior, middle, middle, and inferior and inferior. Moving from front to back, or from anterior to posterior, the next structure will be the pharynx, which is sometimes commonly called the throat. In reality, the pharynx is made up of three different parts. As we follow air in, the first portion would be the nasopharynx, or the portion of the pharynx that's associated with the nasal cavity. There are a couple notable structures. One is the auditory tube. So it's a small channel that would lead to the ear from the inside out. And then there's this structure right here, sometimes known as the adenoid glands, but more technically known as the pharyngeal or pharyngeal tonsils, which may play a role in immune function and defense. Immediately posterior to the oral cavity is the oropharynx, the portion of the throat associated with the mouth. A couple notable structures will be the lingual tonsils, which are found on the back of the tongue, and the palatine or the palatine tonsils, which are found on the roof of the mouth. The final portion of the throat is the laryngopharynx or the laryngopharynx, which is going to be the lower portion. It's covered up here just a little bit by the larynx, so if I remove the larynx, we can get an internal view. Right. At the bottom of the pharynx, the laryngopharynx, there's a fork in the road. One of the tubes leads to the digestive system. This would be the esophagus. If we follow air down, we would end up entering the larynx. At the top of the larynx, there's a structure called the epiglottis that serves to control the movement of air into and out of the respiratory system, but also it will prevent food and beverages from entering the respiratory system. This larger structure here is sometimes simply known as the larynx. Moving over to the next model, this will be an anterior view of some of the structures moving on down. So for orientation, this is the larynx right up here. This would be the thyroid cartilage, or the prominent portion, sometimes known as the Adam's apple. Underneath the larynx, there's an air pathway called the trachea. It's got many rings of cartilage to help keep it open. At the bottom of the trachea, there are branches for the bronchial tree. The first branches, one to the right lung and one to the left lung, are known as main bronchi. This is the right primary bronchus. This is the left primary bronchus. Branching from the main bronchi, or primary bronchi, there are lobar bronchi, one for each lobe. The right lung has 3 lobes, the left lung has 2. Thus, on the right side, there will be 3 lobar bronchi. On the left side, there will be 2 lobar bronchi. The smaller branches off of the lobar bronchi that go to the individual segments of the lungs are called segmental bronchi. You can see them as smaller structures on this model. The lungs proper are comprised or divided into lobes. Put this back on here for scale. On the right side, there's a right superior lobe, a right middle lobe, which you see here, and then a right inferior lobe, which is kind of tucked around and back, and is the lowest most portion. On the left side, there are two lobes. There's a left superior lobe and a left inferior lobe. This skeletal muscle tissue right here is known as the diaphragm. It will separate the thoracic cavity from the abdominal pelvic cavity. It contains skeletal muscle, so there is some voluntary control, and this functions to help change the size in the thoracic cavity during respiration.